Going everyone, Tim French here, back once again for another exciting edition of the Job Hunter podcast. Get ready to buckle up, start your engines and mirror signal manoeuvre as we explore the fascinating world of motorsport. I'll not say too much more for fear of giving the game away, so until then, sit back, relax, and let's start this intro tune. Hello and welcome to the Job Hunter podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome Tim Silvey, motorsport industry veteran and co-host of the MotorMouth Podcast, to the show. Tim, thanks for coming on. Why don't we start off by hearing a bit more about your life, your background and your link to motorsport?
Hi, thanks for having me on, Tim. Good name, by the way. Thanks. I mean, my background is pretty, I guess, sort of unusual, I suppose, in the sense that I didn't do very well in education. I went to college and then didn't do very well, and then scraped through clearing into a really not great university and dropped out before I got my degree. So my sort of start to life wasn't amazing, and I was a terrible student, and left university with absolutely no idea what I was going to do at all, and at that point had no connection to motorsport either. So I was 19ish, something like that, 20, left uni with absolutely no idea what to do. The only thing I did know was that I wanted to earn money, because I did a gap year, which I did manage to complete while I was at university, when I went and worked in the States for a year. And that was where I realized that I was much better suited to work than I was education.
Amazing. And just want to say there's no such thing as a bad university anymore. So I'm sure whatever university you went to.
I don't know. I won't drop the name, but I mean, basically, I didn't. My grades were so poor that I left things so late that I had no choice where I went. So I went through clearing. I was basically like, this is the university you can go to. And the first day that I saw it was the first day of term, and I was pretty shocked when I turned up. I mean, whether it's classified as a university, I don't even know. It's like a university college, and it's called something different to what it was called when I was there, but it wasn't great.
Is that a bit of a regret then? Do you kind of think, I wish I'd just not bothered with that year?
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it's a regret in the sense that education didn't agree with me. I didn't agree with education. I don't particularly like the system we have in the UK. And yeah, I in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have gone to university. You know, I think if you're going into a certain professions, it's absolutely essential. You know, if you're going to be a lawyer or, I don't know, some professional services, you're going on to the city and there's a specific qualification you need, then I think it's amazing. And for certain people, it's great. For me, it wasn't. From personal, my personal view on the world, it wasn't for me. But it wasn't a regret in the sense that it allowed me to do that year in America, which made me sit up and go, right, okay, I know that I need to start getting out there and earning money. And that was part of the reason I ended up leaving university a bit early, because I thought this is a waste of time. I'm wasting time. I could be out there earning money.
So what was your big start in motorsport, and where's your journey kind of gone over the last decade and a half?
Well, I let after uni, I got myself onto a graduate recruitment scheme at a company called Michael Page, which is a big global recruitment company. And I shouldn't really have got onto their graduate scheme because I wasn't technically a graduate, but I got onto it, and it was in sales, basically. Recruitment is essentially sales, and I did okay. I was there for about a year. I did quite well and kind of enjoyed it, but it was what, again, I had no other choice. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was sort of, fiddling around doing bits and bobs, and thought, well, what can I do? I'll go and do recruitment. They'll take all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I learned I was decent at sales, but I wasn't passionate about the job. And I played cricket with a guy called Jonathan Bodansky, who had at the time a sports sponsorship agency called Bodansky Sponsorship Limited, which later became BSL World, and then became BSL World, and then they opened up an office in the Middle East, BSL Middle East, and then eventually it was sold to another group. But he said to me, "Why don't you come and do a 3-month internship or placement? You love sport. We do Formula One and other bits and pieces, and give it a go." So I trotted off there. I left the recruitment job, did 3 months at BSL, and stayed for 6 or 7 years, and left as a shareholder and director.
Wow, that's an impressive rise up through the ranks. And so you said that you worked essentially for an advertising company within motorsport. What sort of stuff were you managing day to day? You mentioned Formula One a bit. What kind of projects were you working on while you were there?
Well, it was. It was technically a sponsorship agency. It was a traditional sponsorship agency in sport, but they had a focus in Formula One because they had a long-standing client in Toyota and Panasonic, and at the time, Panasonic was Toyota's title sponsor in Formula One. So I started out doing a few bits with them, and that went quite well. And then in 2000, I started with them in 2005, and it was doing the Panasonic stuff, and also some bits with Toyota and Lexus, who were Toyota and Lexus are the same brand essentially. They did some sponsorship of the British Open, so I did some golf and various bits and pieces. And then in 2007, ING Bank came along and decided to sponsor the Renault Formula One team, and we came into the process pretty early. And ING's global marketing or chief marketing officer was a lady called Isabel Connor, who's a powerhouse of a businesswoman and marketer, and still is, but not with that company anymore. And she was looking for an agency to help activate their sponsorship of Renault, and we won that contract. So I was put into a position where I was heading up a small team that was looking after ING Bank's sponsorship of Renault and activating that partnership for 3 years. And that's when I really started to get into the swing of sports marketing and especially Formula One sponsorship and marketing, and spent 3 brilliant years with ING and Renault, traveling around the world and having a brilliant time activating their partnership. And that's where the whole motorsport thing started to become interesting to me, from a sporting perspective, but much more so from a commercial perspective.
And is that a lot of making connections and talking to people and essentially being face to face? Or I imagine it's not much sitting behind a desk, is it?
Well, a bit of both. I mean, there was a lot of traveling. I can't remember how many races there were at the time in the season, but maybe like 19, 20, something like that, as opposed to the 23 that we have this year. And I went to pretty much every race for those sort of 3 years with ING, but actually the sort of 6 years I was with the company, I went to pretty much every race every year. And it was a combination of things. It was taking assets that the team gave to ING, whether it was image rights or time with the drivers or whatever, and creating experiences or creating marketing campaigns, or being trackside with a group of ING executives and their prospects or clients, and entertaining them face to face, like you say, and in the paddock club, or giving them tours around the paddock and tours around the city that the F1 was in, and doing all that traditional hospitality, which was very much, for ING anyway, was a big focus at the time. They had a big splash with branding. Like if you Google ING Renault, the car is covered in ING.
I remember that car. Yeah,
it's a horrible looking car. It's the orange, white, blue mess, and our uniform was disgusting. White trousers with a green shirt. You couldn't miss us. But their whole plan, Isabel Connor just wanted to go in year 1, make a massive splash. Year 2, consolidate. Year 3, exit. And that's what she did. And the awareness of the brand went through the roof because of Formula One, but there was a lot of entertaining trackside. So it was a great case study for ING, but it was back in the days when it was all about logo placement and corporate hospitality. That's pretty much all they wanted to do.
And do you think that's kind of changed in the 2020 era? And obviously, I will briefly say the coronavirus word, but I'm guessing you can't do a lot of that anymore. And the the way it is now is probably quite different, isn't it?
It's definitely changed. The whole sponsorship landscape has changed immeasurably since those days. So that was pre crash. So and I don't mean car crash. I mean economic
financial
crash, financial crash. Where it was before that, it was very different. Like we stayed in lovely hotels. We went to amazing parties. It was a fun job. Like it was we just had a nice time, and corporate hospitality, great bit of logo. You know, it was all very jolly. And after the crash, things seemed to change. Budgets got stripped back. It became much more strategic because you had to be more direct and accurate with your funds. It became much more, sponsorship seemed to me to become much more focused and around activation, storytelling, proper marketing, rather than just a logo on a car and some corporate hospitality. It's evolved so much since then. And then, as you say, as we go through coronavirus, when it first happened at the Australian Grand Prix, when Formula One decided to cancel the race and everyone got sent home, we all immediately panicked. Everyone in the industry was like, what are we going to do now? And all the live events and live activations were stopped, and we all had to adjust and do everything virtually. And I mean, everything. And you had to find a way to create digital experiences, whether it's hospitality or an activation, or, you know, a webinar or player appearance or whatever it might be, all went online. So it's changed completely, but it's now stabilized, and brands are suddenly more comfortable. You know, that knee-jerk reaction is gone, and everyone's getting into the swing of doing sponsorship activation in this digital world.
So would you say you've kind of always known you wanted to be involved in motorsport in some capacity, or like by the sounds of it, you kind of stumbled into it a bit? But
yeah, stumbled into it, but and I think it wouldn't have mattered necessarily. I think motorsport is a bit of a byproduct. You know, I stumbled into motorsport, but it could have been football or rugby or anything.
Sport in some capacity, then.
Sport in some capacity, and on the commercial side of it, that commercial sports business side, sponsorship, marketing, commercialization, sales. I love all of that, and to me, it wouldn't really matter if it was Formula One or something else. Yeah, I've become a big fan by default, and I know a lot about motorsport now, but only because I've sort of settled into it, and that happens to be my thing these days. But yeah, back then, I could have fallen into any sport and sort of run with it.
And do you think that's kind of a good life lesson for any of our listeners potentially, that you don't have to have a set plan? In essence, you can freestyle it a bit and bend with the wind.
Yeah, I mean, it's all individual, isn't it? You know, I've always been a bit fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. I plan a lot, but I am a bit more. I don't mind risk. I don't mind diving in head first and just seeing what happens. But I really admire those who have more of a plan. And I wish I had, to be honest, because when I was 20 years old, I wish I'd known exactly what I wanted to do. And the example I always give is on the podcast, which we'll probably talk about later. My podcast host, co-host Harry, who's 23, he's since he was probably 19, has been crystal clear on his career and his path, and it's, you know, media, broadcasting, motorsport, and that's it. You know, and he's been totally single-minded with that, and because of that, he's worked in Formula E, he's worked in Formula One, he's interviewed some of the biggest names in motorsport. He's put himself in great positions. He's spent time with Formula One, in there behind the scenes, and he's 23 years old. And you know, at 23 years old, he like today we sat down with Nico Rosberg, and Harry didn't bat an eyelid. You know, at 23, if I'd sat down with Nico Rosberg, I'd have completely crumbled. You know, so I really admire those people who have that plan. But like I say, everyone's an individual, and everyone has a different way of making their way through life and navigating through their younger years. And for me, it was fly by the seat of your pants, say yes to every opportunity, work really hard, and hope for the best. And it's worked out okay.
I don't think that's a bad way to go at all, to be honest. And we definitely will get onto the podcast later, because I've some questions about that. And obviously, you know, I'm in awe of someone that's even got to interview a Formula One world champion. So yeah, congratulations on that. Would you say that being from the UK, or, you know, any of our listeners that are from the UK are in a very good position, I would assume, for working in motorsport. What kind of roles are they? Obviously, you talked about the commercial aspects, but if you were to think, how exactly do you get a job in motorsport in the UK? What can the average Joe on the street do to be more involved with motorsport?
I mean, if you've got a passion for it and you want to be in motorsport, then I'm sure you can find your niche. We are lucky because we have so many of the Formula One teams based here. But not only that, you've got several Formula E teams. You have British touring cars, and the list goes on. But equally, in other countries, there's plenty as well. There are Formula One teams dotted around the world. There's amazing race series in all sorts of countries. In the States, they've got IndyCar and NASCAR, which do sponsorship arguably a lot better than we do in Formula One. There are opportunities out there. And I think it's just a case of persistence and single-mindedness and knowing a bit, contrary to what I said, knowing a bit about what you want to do. Whether it's engineering or aerodynamics or marketing and commercial and PR, there are so many different roles available in motorsport. If you have that passion and you've got something that you can offer the industry, then there's no reason why you can't make your way in there and be a success.
You mentioned, we've already talked about kind of your time at the start of your career. What happened after that when you finished with IAG?
I did the ING Renault stuff continued until 2009, and then that ended pretty abruptly when Nelson Piquet Jr. Crashed in a straight line in Singapore, and that sort of PR and media storm which followed, the ING relationship ended pretty sharply after that. And that was 2009. Then I went out that summer to the Middle East. I moved to Abu Dhabi, and I was one of the first, the original team members at Yas Marina Circuit, which is the F1 track on Yas Island in Abu Dhabi, or just outside Abu Dhabi. And I was living on the island. There was no racetrack there. It was just a sand pit. It was all a real culture shock and a shock to the system, and learned a lot extremely quickly. And I stayed there until 2012 and delivered several Grand Prix, and worked at that race until about 2016, 17, something like that, in one capacity or another. So I was in the Middle East for a few years up until about 2012, opened an office out there for the company I was working for, consulting through, and had a great time, but always had this niggling feeling that I wanted to do something myself. And so in 2012, my thought was, I was comfortable. I was living in the Middle East, tax-free. Life was pretty good. I had a nice apartment on the Dubai waterfront at Jumeirah Beach Residence. Everything was pretty sweet. I had no reason to change, but there was something niggling away at me. So I handed in my notice, flew back to the UK, and started a company called Silvey Sports, which still exists today, but it's just essentially a vehicle for me to consult through. And I've done all sorts of stuff through that, whether it be the London Olympics, when we did a huge program and we ended up employing about 50 contractors to run a bunch of transportation programs for different sports marketing agencies across London and the games, which was a 6-month contract, through to Winter Olympics in Sochi, and then loads of consultancy bits and bobs in Formula One, and taking big groups to Grand Prix, and all sorts of stuff has been pushed through Silvey Sports. So that's been really good fun. So that took me up till about 2014-ish, something like that. And then I fell into another thing, which was racing driver management through Silvey Sports. So I started managing racing drivers, and had a roster of 5 or 6, some quite high profile, that raced in F1, and down to sort of more junior categories. And Jamie Chadwick, who's doing really well, is a female racing driver, and a Le Mans driver, F1, British touring cars, world touring cars, stuff like that. I did that for about 5 or 6 years, again through Silvey Sports, before before finding a couple of opportunities, one being MotorMouth and the other one being some consultancy through a company called RightFormula, who are a sports marketing consultancy in Vauxhall. And I've been with them on a consultancy basis for nearly 3 years, I think now. Yeah.
That is a very impressive CV, if I must say. I feel like there's probably nothing you haven't done in the sporting world. And was there any point you kind of went, oh God, I'm not sure I can do this? Because they seem like there's some pretty big projects.
Yeah. I mean, the first one was the Abu Dhabi trip. You know, it was one of those where they were like, do you want to go? It was to be part of the venue management team. I was like, yeah, why not? Give it a go. And I remember turning up on my first day and thinking, I'm out of my depth here. And Richard Cregan, who was the CEO of the track, my first day was like, what's your plan? You know, we've got a Grand Prix in a few months. What's your plan for this bit and that bit? And I didn't have answers. I was like, I don't know. This is big boy stuff. I am not ready for this. So that was terrifying. But you find your feet quickly in those situations. And Richard and I have become friends now, and you know, it's fine. But at the time it was horrible. And the first 6 months were the worst 6 months of my life. Like literally it was grueling. So that was terrifying. Starting Silvey Sports was terrifying. You know, it's so much to learn as you navigate your way through life, and you know, finding yourself and learning about yourself and feeling comfortable in your own skin in a work capacity. So I've had loads of dodgy moments, but you know, you learn from those. So yeah, it's part of it. It's part of the process.
And do you have any particular highlights kind of over the course of your career, you know, specifically in motorsport? Or is there anything that stand out to you?
I mean, there getting the London Olympics gig was a big deal, because I literally just started the Silvey Sports, and you know, we very quickly got the London Olympics thing, and you know, very, very quickly had 50 staff that we suddenly had to look after, and not really knowing what we were doing, you know, just sort of running with it. And that was really nice. You know, it's really hard work. Everyone worked their socks off. But you know, we'd meet up in London every couple of weeks and have a few drinks, and it was just nice to sit there and, you know, be at the top of the table thinking, all these people are here because of me. All these people are earning money because of me. You know, we've got them spread across London doing all sorts of stuff for the Olympics. And that was a really nice feeling. And then I guess, you know, finding a passion in MotorMouth was a great moment, because I was thinking about that company for a while before it started. So that was a proud moment. But there's been many, you know, and working with people like Robin at RightFormula, who's becoming very quickly an industry leader, you know, sort of in the mold of Zach Brown, I suppose. Robin's, you know, incredibly well connected, a top marketer in motorsport, and you know, working with him is a highlight. There are so many. I'm very grateful for my career and life. You know, I think I've had lots of downs that, you know, would break some people. Like, we've had some really rough times, but we've kept going, and the ups have been far more. And yeah, I feel very lucky.
I think that's quite an important point, actually, as well, that it's not always roses, is it? I think, you know, we could. I'm sure I've had guests on in the past and will in the future that want to paint this absolutely amazing picture of their life, but you kind of learn more, don't you, from those moments of difficulty and failure, don't you?
100%. And you know, I've had the worst times probably, you know, after starting your own business, our own business, and my wife has her own businesses as well. We had one calamitous year where we lost everything, you know, for lots of different reasons. Everything just vanished, and we had to move out. I had to rent our house out for 6 months or 9 months, you know, and we were like, we haven't got any money. We've got none, you know, we barely got enough to buy a tin of baked beans. But opportunities started presenting themselves again, and we've worked our way up and come through it. And touch wood, as of today, everything is tickety boo.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm very much in awe of what you've achieved. I think, being at the very start of my career, it gives me hope that that things can be different, and obviously you don't have to. I don't have to be so concerned or worried about where the path's going to go, and just kind of let it fly a bit. But how would you say that your job and the kind of the world of sport you've been in has changed over the last 15 years that you've been involved with it?
It's like I said, it's certainly more strategic, and it's you have to be an expert in it more now, I feel. And I don't know whether that's just because of my age and navigating through the business. Perhaps at the start, maybe it was still like that. I was just so wet behind the ears that I didn't realize. But I think the last 5 years, especially, I've started to feel like I feel very different now. Even the last 4 or 5 years, I feel very different to how I did previous. And my mid to late 30s have made me feel a lot more comfortable and confident in the industry, in my place in the industry, and knowledge-wise, everything. I feel like it's taken a long time to feel totally at ease with what I'm doing and really love it. Like, I love what I do now, like absolutely love it. And I love that the industry has moved and come along and is now full of amazing individuals who are fantastic at their jobs and are real professionals, not just winging it. Its sponsorship has come a long way.
And so do you have any specific aspirations for the next part of your career? I imagine sky's the limit with the work you're doing.
I mean, it's I love what I'm doing with RightFormula. I really enjoy working there, and we're doing lots. Well, Robin and the executive team there are doing some really exciting things, and I want to keep doing that for as long as I can. And then separate to that, MotorMouth is my real focus and passion at the moment. And that's what's really getting me out of bed in the morning, and that's the thing that I'm really trying to spend considerable time on and build into something much bigger than just me.
So you might as well address the podcast-shaped elephant in the room. For those that might not have heard MotorMouth, what exactly is it, and why should they listen?
Well, it is a podcast. It's also other things. So we have an app which you can get on Android and Apple, and it's called MotorMouth. It's also a website, and it serves up news, views, video, exclusive content that we make and create in-house. And it has a podcast, which was an afterthought, to be honest. The original plan was to create this community. So the app and the website is somewhere where you can go, you sign up, you create a profile, you can engage with other users, you can create your own content, upload your own imagery. There's lots of user-generated stuff on there, but you can also follow live up-to-the-minute news and comment on it. We've got live race timings across various championships, and there's loads of stuff on there, and it's pretty live news. It's updated almost every minute. So that's really exciting, and that's growing. And then we built the podcast as a marketing tool. We just wanted to drive more traffic to the app. So we started it with that in mind, but it's become much more than that, and it's now much, much bigger than we ever anticipated. And we've had some incredible guests on. We've monetized it. We've got sponsors and advertisers. We've got big partnerships with charities, and we've got events that have sprung off the back of it. We're doing a karting event when COVID's out of the way, celebrity karting event, which has gone down brilliantly. Lots of people have registered their interest for that. And it'll be Joe Public racing against ex-F1 drivers, and loads of cool cars on display, like James Hunt's old Hesketh 308 Mark 1 car. And we've got a sim racing championship coming up in the next few weeks in Rallycross with some celebrity drivers in that. And it's sort of turning into this kind of media publisher stroke media hub for motorsport. And the podcast.
You can call it an empire. It's fine. You're going to be the next.
Certainly not an empire yet, but it's we've got a long way to go. But and there's myself. There's a guy called Frank who's our CTO. We've got a guy called Harry who's head of media and host of the podcast as well, and a few other people floating around in finance and various other areas. So it's slowly building up, and that's what's got me excited, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a listener. They're really good episodes. I really enjoyed them. Like I said to you before we came on air, I've listened to the Jake Humphrey episode. I listened to Esme Hawkey's episode as well. Obviously, she's the girlfriend of Jordan Pepper, former Bentley driver, so I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I know this is a reverse shameless plug. I'm actually plugging your podcast, but
Keep going. Great.
But yeah, it's if you enjoy motorsport from any formula, any world, it's definitely for you. There's so many interesting people, and obviously you've mentioned Nico Rosberg. What was that like? Obviously, I'm sure you've interviewed a lot of former world champions and interesting people, but was that quite a big thing for you?
It was actually. It was the first one that really made me think, because we've been super lucky. We almost from episode 1 we've had quite big people on, and we have had former F1 world champions. We had Mario Andretti recently, who's a Formula 1 world champion and an IndyCar champion several times. We've had former F1 drivers like Mark Webber, David Coulthard. We've had IndyCar drivers, loads of Formula E people, and pundits like Crofty and Eddie Jordan and stuff like that. So we were kind of getting, well, we're used to talking to important people in motorsport, and kind of don't take it for granted, but we feel comfortable doing it. But today we interviewed Nico today, and his episode will come out in, I think, a few weeks. I think probably to launch season 7. But it was the first one that I thought, God, this guy is not only is he a Formula 1 world champion who retired 5 days after he won the world championship, he's beaten to the world championship title potentially the greatest Formula 1 driver that's ever sat in a car, in Lewis Hamilton. He has gone on to start his own Extreme E team. He's a businessman, entrepreneur, green tech entrepreneur, sustainability, climate change. He's a hugely successful person and known worldwide in several fields. And it made me go, Christ, like that's a big deal. Like, he's coming on our show. That's nuts. And you could feel it. He felt like an important guy to talk to. And it was kind of weird, when you look at it like this, you've got your Zoom screen and there's Harry and there's a couple of PR people and then there's Nico Rosberg, and it's all right, Nico, how's it going? So it's weird, but he was very nice. We had a really good chat for 45 minutes or an hour or something, and talked about all sorts. So yeah, it was an experience. Certainly, it was one of those pinch me moments, I think.
And you now realise what I'm experiencing, Tim, because I imagine the first couple of guests you have on are kind of like your mates, aren't they? They're people you know within the industry, and now you've had a big name, and I feel likewise with yourself, because I feel most of my previous guests have been people that I know. So yeah, you're kind of a big name podcaster, and this is a big deal for me. So yeah, once again, thanks for coming on. What would you say are the difficult questions that you ask your guests? What's a good question to ask someone?
Well, I mean, we're pretty nice to them, to be honest. We sort of pride ourselves on pulling out the personality of the individual, because we're not hard hitting. Like, whenever we approach a new guest, we never say, we often say, we're not journalists, we're not media, we're not trying to catch you out. We just want to understand what you're all about, not just in motorsport, but off track, and what you do, tell us about you. So we don't really hit them with any hard hitting questions or difficult ones. Most of the time, we tried a little bit with Nico today because it felt like too good an opportunity. But yeah, we have a fairly set format. A nice introduction, some pre-prepared questions, some off-script stuff, and then we have 3 questions that we always ask at the end of the show. And one of them is, "What are you scared of?" And that's always quite a fun question, because some people, like Freddie Hunt, James Hunt's son, James Hunt, for those that don't know, I think it was the 1976 Formula 1 world champion with McLaren, sadly went finished his career and then died, but was one of the great characters of the sport. We had his son Freddie on, who's also a racing driver who looks exactly like James. And when we said to him, "What are you scared of?" he couldn't answer because he got choked. So, there was something there that was sort of burning. Other people have said really random stuff, like Crofty said he was scared of tea bags. So that was weird. And we've had a few weird ones, like Sebastian Buemi, I think it was scared of killer whales or something weird, really weird like that. And then we've had other people who are scared of, failure, and they'll talk about their fear of, failing and all that sort of stuff. So we've had so many interesting people, and they all react in very, very different ways. No guest is the same. So it's been a fascinating journey. It's sort of thing you feel like you turn into a book one day, with all the insights that these people have given, like Nico, who's a fascinating guy, who throughout his career you thought it was this kind of really tough, hard exterior, serious guy, and like he said to us today, he was full of self-doubt and just didn't portray that, and had to have, he had a mind coach, psychologist to help him out with all of that, but we never knew that at the time. We just saw this hard exterior. So everyone's got a story, and we sort of pride ourselves on trying to pull out that story and see a new side to the individual.
Yeah, and I think you do an excellent job. I listened to the Mark Webber episode as well, and I found that fascinating. So, yeah, that last plug for MotorMouth Podcast, it's fantastic if you've not heard it, so definitely check it out. You've mentioned Formula E, and you've mentioned Extreme E and all these E-based formulas. Do you think that's the future of motorsport? Do you think that's where we're heading?
I mean, it is certainly the future of most motorsport. So Formula E, which has been around since 2014, 15, I think, something like that. We're into its 7th season this year. And they've done incredibly well. The big manufacturers have come and gone, and more come back. And that is sustainable racing to a degree. I mean, you still have to fly to races, churn out airplane fumes to get there, but once they're there, they're trying to do good things. And some of the teams, I think one of the teams is carbon neutral EVR, and there's a lot of climate change awareness going on in the sport, so that's great. And then Extreme E even more so, which is this new SUV, all electric SUV racing in hard to reach countries like Senegal, or parts of the countries like Senegal, or even parts of Saudi, and a few other interesting countries where they try and go race, but also try and do some good in that country, raise awareness for that country, do some nice things around sustainability and climate change there. And actually Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton and now Jenson Button all have their own teams in that series. So they have a sustainable ship that they have a floating paddock that goes from race to race, so they're really trying to raise awareness, and that's brilliant. So the future is certainly electric in that regard. But then you have Formula One, which is still not fully electric, and they will never be fully electric for lots of reasons. They don't have the right to be electric, in the sense that Formula E have the exclusive rights to single-seater electric race cars. So Formula One can't go down that road. They can go synthetic and all that sort of stuff. But for me, and I think for lots of other people, Formula One will continue to be the pinnacle of motor racing for the foreseeable future.
And obviously, one thing to mention with the Extreme E is obviously it's both men and women in the team, isn't it? Which is probably the first of its kind in that sense. What do you think Formula One can do to break that kind of glass ceiling when it comes to a full-time female driver within a team?
Yeah, I think they can do bits and bobs. Formula One is trying to be more inclusive. I mean, there is a problem in that there's not just racing drivers, but up and down the paddock with the teams, there's not enough women. And there are some women engineers out there, and there are some women marketing, women in marketing functions and other areas, but there needs to be much more. I think Formula One's very conscious and aware of that, as are the teams, and they're all trying to adapt and change. But one thing you do have now, which we didn't have a few years ago, even 3 or 4 years ago, is the W Series, which David Coulthard's involved with, and Catherine Bonmuir, who we've had on the show, is the founder of that. And that series was created really to create more opportunity for females in motorsport, purely by putting more females in seats. It's an all female grid. That is the only prerequisite. You have to be a female, and it's been hugely successful. And I went to the Brands Hatch round, and it was amazing to see these 5-year-old girls in racing overalls looking up to these people like Jamie Chadwick and Emma Kimmerleinen, who we've got coming up in a couple of weeks, and Alice Powell, and seeing these kids look at these female racing idols. And that's what I think is going to hopefully get the momentum going in female motorsport, and they get super license points in that championship, which means that you can take those forward into something like Formula One. But it just gives more women the opportunity to get in a race car, try and be competitive, and then move on to other series where they can race against boys, and then hopefully at some point be picked up by an F1 team like Jamie Chadwick has with Williams, and maybe in 5 or so years, maybe longer, we'll start to see some women coming through into Formula One.
Do you think sponsors have a kind of obligation to help out more with that kind of side of things of the W Series? Because obviously big name sponsors have quite a large amount of clout, and they could help progress the sport in that sense.
Yeah, I think everyone has a responsibility to try and make motorsport more diverse, because it is still a problem. Not just females, but ethnic minorities. You look up and down the grid in F1, and it's pretty obvious who most of them are. Either very, very wealthy white middle class guys, or quite rightly, people that are there on merit. It just so happens that the best one of them has come from a minority background. So Lewis has been very vocal about Black Lives Matter and that movement. So there's a lot that needs to change, but it is happening. But then there's other forms of racing where it's not happening, and places like NASCAR are still very often in the dark ages when it comes to that. We had Willie T. Ribbs on, who told us about that and the racial abuse he suffered and that he still sees today. So I think there's still a long way to go, but everyone's very aware of it now, which is good, and people are thinking much more deeply about it thanks to things like Black Lives Matter.
Obviously, you've mentioned the kind of global push to be more sustainable and be more aware of climate change within the industry. Do you think motorsport still has a place, given a lot of young people are less interested in cars in general and obviously more environmentally conscious anyway? Could this be something that isn't here in 10, 15, 20 years time and it's replaced with something else? Or do you think it is here to stay?
I think it's still here to stay. I mean, there is still a huge amount of interest around motorsport. Formula One still holds a fascination for people. Formula E is helping, and Extreme E is helping to bring that new generation of fans through. But even Formula One is much more engaging to young people now. That some of the drivers that you have in it, like Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, and some of the other younger guys who are very active on Twitch and stream a lot of their online gaming, not just in motorsport, but League of Legends and other types of esports. So there is an engaging element to the characters that are in Formula One now. There's tons of sim racing out there, primarily because of coronavirus. Companies like The Race, Veloce, Formula One itself, and now Formula E as well have their own championships online. So I think they're doing a pretty good job now of engaging young people and know the value in that. So I think as long as they continue in that direction, I think that the future of motorsport is pretty safe.
So if you had to pick your favourite Formula One era, what would it be? If we could say turbo hybrid or V10s scream around the track, or ground effect cars, what for you is your favourite era, and why would that be?
I mean, I don't know. I think part of me thinks the old days of the Mansell against Prost and Senna and
the moustache,
the tash, and Williams against McLaren in those iconic liveried cars, and the noise that they made. Even the V6 cars back in the day sounded really cool. The V8s I love, the V10s I love, and if you'd asked me that question a year ago or maybe two years ago, I'd probably say I miss the V10, V8 kind of era. But equally now that we look back with rose-tinted glasses, like if you actually go back and watch a lot of the races outside of the classics, you'd have Mansell or Prost or whoever winning by 2 minutes, and there was no one near them. Now you look at races like Bahrain with Lewis and Nico racing wheel to wheel, and incredible close racing. It's way closer now than it ever was, and perhaps that we're in the golden era now. It's just because it's current and we're in it. It doesn't feel like that, and you look back and think, oh, those days with Prost and Berger, and iconic names, iconic cars, and nice old tracks. None of this new fandangled, Abu Dhabi tracks and stuff like that. But I think we're in a pretty good place right now, and ground effect that you mentioned is coming back. So that'll be interesting to see what that does to the racing. So I kind of like the modern era. I like it. If I'm watching YouTube of an evening and pick races, it tends to be the more modern races. And I'm one of those. I live in the moment. I'm a shallow individual, and I'll just stay. Stay in the current. I think I'll take modern F1, to be honest.
I agree with you. I mean, I absolutely love Netflix's Drive to Survive. It's
so good.
Absolutely incredible. Watching that the German F1 episode where it all fell apart for Mercedes, and knowing that was the one episode that Netflix was filming with them, and it just all fell apart was amazing. So, and how many times can you say you've lived in the era of a potentially 8-time world champion? Because no doubt he'll do it again.
I know, and that's when you think, we're lucky to be living through this. We're lucky in a number of ways. We have a Formula One channel dedicated to Formula One that you can watch as much Formula One as your heart's desire. So you've got easy access to it. It's all over the internet. YouTube, it's all there for you to watch and consume. You can get the historical stuff if you want to, but like you say, we've got Lewis Hamilton, who is fast becoming the best racing driver that's ever lived. Some people think he already is, and you've got people like Max Verstappen, causing chaos. You've got the battles that Nico and Lewis had. There's so much good stuff. Lando and Charles, all these amazing young talents. There's just so much good stuff happening up and down the grid, and with Aston Martin coming back, wow, that's so cool. So there's a lot of good stuff going on at the moment. I'm thoroughly enjoying Formula One as it is.
Right, so changing direction. At this point in the show, I usually do my Tim's 3 Tips segment, which is still the worst name in the world, and I haven't changed it, and I probably won't now, out of the bitterness of my heart. But seeing as you're a fellow Tim, I feel like I can't do this because it's going to be a bit confusing. So I think instead, I will leave it up to you to decide how many tips you want to do and what you want them to be on, because usually it's like an everyday problem that our listeners can deal with. Last week it was how to get out of quicksand, or how to win an argument. But I feel like you've got this. I feel confident in your ability to do this as a podcast host. So I'll let you fly on this one.
I'm interested how you get out of quicksand. I guess you just lie on your back or something and drag yourself out.
I had a guy who was very much salt of the earth, and just went, you sit down and you don't move and you wait for someone to turn up with a tractor, and that was pretty much it. So yeah.
Well, I don't know where I got that. It was probably one of my kids' programs where someone got trapped in quicksand. Dora the Explorer. Yeah, they lay on their backs or something. Anyway, I digress. So I have I wheel out this if I'm on a webinar or a podcast or whatever, and I think it's relevant in this type of scenario where it's it's about jobs or careers or anything like that. I think hopefully it will help. I have a sort of 8. I have 8 quick things that I've stood by or I've learned over the years that have helped me, and I wheeled this out with a webinar I did with Jenny Gow, and it seemed to resonate with some young people who messaged me on LinkedIn and stuff. So I've sort of stuck with it. So I'll just go for it. Shall I just rattle through them? So first, have a passion for it, which is obvious. I think if you have a passion for something and you know what you want to do, you can make it a reality. My passion became motorsport and the commercial side of motorsport, the business of motorsport, and I saw an area where I thought I could add value in digital, and I created MotorMouth against the advice of many people, and there were many critics, and it's going all right. So I think have a passion. And don't take no for an answer, just go for it. Work harder than everyone else, and it's always been built in me to work hard, and Harry is the same. he works incredibly hard. We both do. Most days I work quite late, and I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. It's just the way that it goes for me at the moment because I've got a lot on. But I tend to try and work harder than anybody else, and I mean not necessarily longer hours, but more efficiently. So work with accuracy, be efficient with your time, don't faff, and have empathy with that work. Not everyone is like you. Not everyone works like you. So have empathy. And I know that now, particularly having currently working with a lot of young people, you have to have empathy and put yourself in their shoes because it's, everyone has a different way of looking at the world. Show enthusiasm. I can't stand when people don't, give it their all or show enthusiasm. I have next to no qualifications, but I've always been enthusiastic, and that seems to have helped. It really does. Soft skills like that get you a long way. Be daring, and I'm always telling people this. Sorry for the buzzes. I'm always telling people this, even at work now. Let your voice be heard. If you're in a meeting with a client or an internal meeting, whatever, don't sit back and wait and be worried about what you're going to say. Because I remember thinking when I was growing up through my career, I would often sit in on meetings and think something in my head and be too scared to say it. And then 2 seconds later, a 40-year-old guy would say exactly what I was thinking, and everyone would go, "God, great idea." And the amount of times I've sat in that exact scenario and thought, come on, just say it. And after a while, it's like, screw it. I'm just going to start saying stuff. And sometimes I'm right. And sometimes I'm completely off the mark. But who cares? You're not going to get fired for giving an opinion. So I think let your voice be heard. The moment you start doing that and get used to doing that, you start growing and people start listening and conversing, and you get, swapping opinions. And that's great. And then you're above everyone else because you're showing that you care, and you're having an opinion. So you must let your voice be heard. Easy one, be punctual. And by that, I mean, be early. So many people are either on time or late, and it drives me nuts. Learn the industry off your own back. We're so lucky now. We have the internet, a free resource. There's so much information on the internet. If I don't understand something, I just look it up. There are so many webinars. There's things like this. People doing great podcasts and putting stuff out there that you can just listen to and absorb. There's no excuse not to learn your industry. Take every opportunity or every measured opportunity that comes your way. Sometimes it may not feel relevant, or it might feel like it's not for you. I've taken loads of opportunities that are not relevant, do not appear relevant to me, but have ended up being relevant or setting me on a path to something new that's been great. So take every measured opportunity, and finally ignore the negativity. Like, just push it away from your life. There is no point to it. I don't waste my breath or my ears or anything on negativity, whether that's a negative individual, a negative thought I have, whatever. I just don't deal with it. I just dismiss it, and I'll acknowledge it and just chuck it away. I've literally got no time for it. And if I come across negative people in the workplace, I just don't deal with them. I won't listen to them. And I think people will always try and squash dreams. People get jealous, envious. They feel insecure. There's lots of different reasons. Maybe, it's an opportunity to show empathy and see what's up with that person and try and turn it around. But if they're adamant on being negative, or I have a negative thought about something, I just try and snap out of it and bash it away. So yeah, I think those would be my main tips, although there's probably lots of other much more intelligent stuff, but those things seem to work for me.
Tim, they're excellent, and I'm sure there'll be useful takeaways for a lot of the people listening. I'm probably going to wrap it up with one more question, if I could. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self right now, at the start of your career, what would you say to them, or what advice would you give yourself?
I'd probably say have more faith in your own ability, because while I worked really hard and I tried very hard and showed lots of enthusiasm early on, like I said, I didn't put my head above the parapet. I could have progressed quicker. I think I'd have said that, but also just enjoy it. Don't worry about everything. I think I certainly did when I was in my early 20s, just starting out in my career. I worried about everything. I worried about what people thought. I worried about what I said, worried about what I wore, what my hair looked like, like everything. And I'd just say, let's just chill out, just enjoy it, because there's no point worrying about stuff that's outside of your control. So I'd probably say just chill out, enjoy the ride. You'll be all right. You're never going to be destitute. Just put your head down, or put your head up rather, and speak out, and just go for it. Don't worry, it'll be all right.
They are very, very wise words to end on. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Before you go, why don't we share some of your links and whatever to the various places you're available on social media for MotorMouth and whatever? So where can people find you in the podcast?
Well, the podcast, you can just search the MotorMouth Podcast on Google and it should pop up. It's on pretty much everything, Apple, Android, TuneIn, YouTube, whatever. You can find it. Just search for it on Google. Our social accounts, that's a good one. I think our Twitter is MotorMouth _ I think, and then our Instagram, I think, is MotorMouth Official. I'm sure you'll get to it if you search that. Same on Facebook and LinkedIn, and then MotorMouth.club is our website, and the karting. I have to look up the karting one because we've only just released this. So the karting event, the address is motormouthkartrace.com. So if you like karting and you want to meet some famous faces and race against them, register your interest at motormouthkartrace.com. Like I say, have a look at motormouth.club. You can find the app if you just search MotorMouth on your phone in your app store. So it's all there. Just dig it out, have a nose around, and see what you think.
And of course, I'll pop all of the information in the show notes for anyone that hasn't caught that and written it down yet. Tim, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute blast chatting to you.
Sorry, Tim, one more thing before you wrap up. There's with RightFormula as well. If there's people listening who are interested in sports marketing, I believe RightFormula are starting to look at internships and opportunities for younger people. So if there are people out there who want to get into that world or have an interest in it or have done a bit of it, then get in touch either with me or through you or with RightFormula Direct, because there'll certainly be opportunities there, I think, opening up as well. Sorry.
Thank you. No, and that's very important. No, and again, I'll put the links to RightFormula as well in the show notes. So, if people want to check it out, they can. Tim, honestly, it's been an absolute blast chatting to you. You're a very, very knowledgeable and wise man from the world of motorsport and sponsorship, everything. And like I said, a great podcast host as well. So please go and check him out. I'll definitely be catching you again on the airwaves down the line. But yeah, thanks very much for coming on.
Cheers, Tim. Thank you.
I'd just like to say a huge thanks to our guest this week, Tim Silvey, the host of the MotorMouth Podcast. If you haven't already checked it out, please do. It is absolutely fantastic. Definitely on my subscriber list. If you haven't already, why not consider subscribing or even check out some of the other interesting episodes we've already done. If you fancy leaving a review on your chosen platform, that massively helps us out too. You can find us on all our socials. It's at JobHunterPod, or if you want to get in touch, you can do that. It's jobhunterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Tim French, and tune in next time for another insightful edition of the Job Hunter Podcast.